All right, so here's another one that you suggested because we were actually talking about the great outdoors for a little while,
Hmm.
and then it just kind of fell off, and we weren't sure what to do with it. And then right after we did the Twister video, you looked it up to see what like suggestions there were,
Hmm.
and once you saw RV, you were like, "Well, of course."
Hmm.
And it's a thing where we should probably preface first off that there is a clear difference in quality here. Neither one was critically liked,
Yeah.
but as far as audiences go, The Great Outdoors obviously found one. And I
Yeah.
know it's a movie I feel like we've been watching our whole lives on and off.
Yeah.
And RV is, as far as I remember, pretty universally disliked.
I think on IMDb, I looked it up. I think on IMDb it has a 5.5.
Yeah, which is pretty low by IMDb standards,
Hmm.
but
It's nowhere near bottom 100 material, but
but I even remember like people in our social circle also because that was when you were kind of on again, off again, working there. I still think in 2006. I'm gonna say.
yeah, I was working there between college.
So we were seeing everything, and our social circle was seeing everything.
Hmm.
And I feel like we're the only people that like actually thought it was funny.
We actually took a couple in jokes from it.
That have never died.
No, they're still here.
And I actually ended up seeing it twice
Hmm.
because because we saw it, and then I ended up going to the drive-in with Dad and our stepmom and her kid at the time. Our half brother wasn't born yet,
Yeah.
and I ended up seeing it again because that just happened to be the night it was there. And it was like, all right, I can do RV again. Why not? So
Do you feel like before we dive in, do you feel like when you rewatched RV that if RV would have been made in the 80s, John Candy would have been Robin Williams' character?
I saw a lot more similarities than I was expecting between Chet Ripley and Bob Monroe.
Yeah. Yeah, with the main difference being that Chet Ripley like has to deal with his asshole relatives on vacation, whereas Bob Monroe lives with assholes 24/7.
And the people he runs into aren't necessarily assholes. They're just a little overzealous in their kindness and happiness.
See, it's funny because in the comparison, in the Great Outdoors, like Chet puts up with so much before at the end of the second act when he snaps. Um, Bob Monroe runs away from the Gornickes as soon as he meets them.
Yeah. So, yeah, I figure also I need to preface real quick. By the miracles of modern technology,
Mhm.
and because it's nearing 90 degrees, I have a fan blasting in my face that by all of our test runs told us that you can't hear that somehow.
Mhm.
You can probably still see my screen moving a little bit. That is the blast blowing my computer a little bit. So hopefully,
Look at it this way. It's moving your screen a little bit, but at least you're not getting like a Paul Greengrass effect.
yeah, it's like very very minor green grass.
It's like baby green grass.
So I figure, I mean, we really could bounce around, but I figure we'll just go through the great outdoors and then work our way to RV. And around the time we're at RV, we'll kind of start bouncing back and forth.
Okay, that'll work.
Yeah, because there's a lot of stuff in the great outdoors that stands alone.
Yeah.
So, yeah, as I was saying, this is one of those movies that we just kind of grew up with, and it's obviously it's a John Hughes script,
Mhm.
which could go either way. And this one found a way, I think, to balance both the things that Hughes is really good at. And he was like that. Like obviously, just the year before this, Candy had done Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Mhm.
which is the perfect Hughes meshing of the over-the-top humor and the sincerity that actually feels sincere,
Yeah.
which he kind of lost his way with in like the 90s.
I would probably go out on a limb and say that Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is probably my favorite John Hughes movie.
Yeah, and I would say, as far as Candy and Hughes go, a lot of people will probably say Uncle Buck is this, but I've always kind of considered Planes, Trains, and Automobiles to be like Candy's defining role.
Yeah. They even had a connection as far back as the original Vacation.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when John Candy comes to play in a John Hughes movie, there's some fun.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that Howard Deutsch directed this, who did Pretty in Pink and Some Kind of Wonderful. So he's able to be Hughes without being Hughes as far as directing. It's like I think Hughes was supposed to direct this, but there was like a scheduling conflict, but she's having a baby, which was the same year.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is the only reason he doesn't. But it basically has the feel of a Hughes movie,
Yeah, it does.
and also complete with a Thomas Newman score. 15-time Academy Award nominee Thomas Newman did the music for this, and it's the debut of a 4-time nominated actress in Annette Bening.
I didn't know that this was her debut.
Yeah, I think she had like a couple of TV movies, but this was her first theatrical movie.
Oh.
And it pretty much cuts right to the chase immediately. There's no build-up. We hear about them being Chicago people and city people, but we never see them in the city. It is all here.
It's kind of like this is a funny comparison to draw, but it's kind of like how The Shining starts. They're headed to where they're going and where everything's going to happen. And we don't see what home life is like.
And it's complete with creepy girls.
Well, no, that's not true because we have Wendy talking to the doctor. So what I just said isn't true. That was a lie. Maury Povich just came in with his envelope to tell me that was a lie.
So, do you find it really surprising that after this movie, the pairing, because they showed up in each other's movies, but usually briefly,
Mm-hmm.
because of how well they worked in this movie, are you surprised the, like, right up front pairing of Candy and Aykroyd didn't happen more often?
I am kind of surprised, yeah.
Because it works perfectly in this. Their characters perfectly play off each other in ways that they're playing characters that they were perfectly suited for.
Yeah.
Like with Aykroyd, obviously you've got the really rich douchebag, or supposedly rich douchebag.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a little wrinkle in there.
And I love that their douchebaggery is built up to. Like we see, we keep cutting back to them driving there, but we never see their faces until they're there. But just in those shots of them driving, we already know their personality.
Yeah.
Before we even see their faces. And then that moment when they're sitting like on the back porch and he's like, Chet, what do you see when you look at this? And he just starts like rattling off like the industrial aspects.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's such a thing that Aykroyd could do, was just rattle off stuff like that and make a character surrounding that.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of like it's oh man, I lost my train of thought. It's kind of like what would happen if you sent Ray Zelinsky into the woods.
And then you've got because he's so like boisterous about the way that he is.
Mm-hmm.
And then Chet is so passive aggressive.
Yeah.
Like I love in that same scene when he's saying like, because Chet doesn't work as hard as everybody else, he's like, oh, and you take the tragic irony of real life out of this.
Mm-hmm.
The way Roman says, like, we're all going to have heart attacks and strokes long before you do. And just the way Chet says, oh, I hope so. Wouldn't that be great? and it's so passive aggressive. It's out there, but Roman doesn't even hear it.
And Chet pretty much hits him in the face with it. and nothing.
And it's like, it's half because he's so passive aggressive, but it's also half because Roman is just that wrapped up in himself.
Yeah, the entire family is.
Yeah. And it's really, when you talk about how good Candy is in this, in the perfect way he played roles like this, there's just something that he brings that only he could to the telling of the Bear story, I feel like.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And it's like, and that's another thing where they always, whenever somebody has their moment to shine, the other always has this great sort of one-off line. Like he gets the whole Bear story, and it's a great Candy scene. It's like one of the great moments of his career is this whole story.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also just love when he does the jump scare when he makes the fire go off and he screams.
Mm-hmm.
Roman's response is, "Come on, I'm half drunk here." And it's like whenever one has the big moment, the other one always has that little moment that comes in also, and they just perfectly play off each other.
Yeah.
So, as far as that goes, what do you think about when the patented Hughes sincerity comes into this?
I don't know, because John Candy kind of displays it throughout the whole thing.
Yeah,
Like John Candy wants to have such a nice family time that he lets a lot of stuff slide in his passive aggressive way.
Yeah, because that was kind of a part I was getting to, and then I trailed off into something else and forgot. But despite the not so great critical reception this got, as far as Hughes being able to balance those things, I do think this is another great example of that, because usually in bad comedies, when they try to do sincerity, the sincerity is almost like tacked on.
Mm-hmm.
And the sincerity kind of comes into the last minute, and they sprinkle stuff throughout this movie in a way that's really well done, where it shows like the difference in regards to how the relationship they have with their own kids.
Mm-hmm.
And how really early on, like you would think it would come in later, but I really like how early they plant the seed that Chet is comforting Ben by saying, oh, the Bear story, well, I kind of exaggerated it. It's not that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
And Roman's outside his door listening to this, almost like he's trying to get tips for himself on how to do that with his daughters. And we see how stiffly he does it and has like no connection with them whatsoever.
Yeah.
And that's an underlying theme through the whole movie.
Yeah.
And I love the way they planted the seed so early on that.
Yeah. And then I love how, like, there's kind of a little, you think Roman is, like, coming clean when he's talking about, like, the investment opportunity he has, but even then you find out he's lying again.
That is brilliant in such a layered way. Because let's talk about, there's actually more I wanted to talk about in regards to the dynamic with the kids, but now that you brought that up, I do have to go into how amazing these two scenes are. Aykroyd really goes all out on this.
Mm-hmm.
Because you talk about balancing the sincerity with the comedy. This is a prime example of how to do that. Because this is a scene that is sincere in the moment, but when you know what the payoff is, it could totally drain itself of that sincerity.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know he's just pulling it out of his ass.
Mm-hmm.
But the way Aykroyd plays this scene so straight, there's even that moment that's so, like, the moment when he pulls the book off the shelf and, like, starts flipping through it while he's talking to him is such a realistic moment in regards to, like, showing how something somebody would do in the midst of an uncomfortable argument.
Yeah.
And that's such a great detail of him just flipping through the book without looking at it.
I wonder if that was an Aykroyd call.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder if it's an Aykroyd call. It also makes me wonder if it was a Roman call, because Roman is acting in this scene too.
That's true.
There's so many layers to the.
It's like for a minute, Dan Aykroyd knows what it's like to play Rick Dalton.
Yeah. And then they just so casually bring back, oh, I made that up.
Yeah.
And it's like, but that's the thing is, it doesn't necessarily drain the stuff out of that scene. Number one, because Aykroyd plays it so well, but also because that payoff is so funny.
Mm-hmm.
Because usually that payoff would be infuriating because it would be them draining the sincerity out of a scene that already works.
Mm-hmm.
But because he just so casually says, "Oh, I made that up," that's such a funny payoff to that.
And I love the realistic reaction of Candy, like, coming across as forgiving him, and then when he finds out that was made up, he gets pissed again.
but they keep it from being a conflict by bringing in the more action oriented part of the climax.
Yeah, we kind of take a detour when the girls go missing.
Yeah, because while I think sincerity is a better climax than the whole like almost actiony portion of it,
Mm-hmm.
it's the perfect place to cut that off to keep it from being a conflict all over again. It just keeps it as a funny punchline, and then we can go on to the next thing.
Yeah.
It's really, I mean, say what you will about it, and some of the comedy is clumsy, but overall, it's a really well put together script. Like, I don't think Hughes was half-assing this, even if it seems like we get some cliche stuff, like the water skiing bit feels like something out of any Disney comedy from the 60s or something.
Mm-hmm.
Though it is funny that they mishear you bastard, with go faster, go faster. That's
Yeah, and that Benning, oh, he's waving, he's ready.
yeah. And I don't know, I've never quite known how to take these subtitled raccoons.
Yeah.
I mean, the raccoons, I guess, is a funny bit, especially with, the setting. It just kind of goes with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know.
I think a funnier slapstick moment in the movie, because you were talking about balance. Yeah, the water skiing scene does seem right out of a Disney movie. But John Candy's delivery when he comes back from the bear chasing him and he goes into the cabin and he just keeps saying, "Big bear chase me," is hilarious.
Yeah,
and them trying to piece it together.
I have no qualms with that.
And then he gets smashed by the door. And I love the payoff that even when he gets up from the door smashing him, even though the bear is clearly attacking everyone, it's still, "Big bear chase me."
Yes, exactly. And then there's another great bit that's also something that feels a bit played out, and that's the bat.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, I'm not quite sure if it's totally played out because it might feel played out because it reminds us of another movie with Black Sheep, but Black Sheep came after this.
Mm-hmm.
But there is one moment in this bat scene that is gold, just absolute pure gold. And you probably know what it is before I even say it. It's when Chet decides he's going to single-handedly confront the bat.
Mm-hmm.
And it is one shot. There's no cuts. No cuts. It is one shot of Chet stoically walking up, going through the door, standing there. The bat just flies. There's nothing over the top about it. There's barely any sound.
I don't think there's even score.
Yeah, just silence. Chet walks through the door, all stoic. The bat flies by and he panics, and then he just stoically as he walks through it, walks right back out.
I believe he just says, "It grazed me."
That is a perfect comedic moment. That is chef's kiss worthy.
And what makes it funny too, to me, is the fact that the family clearly saw the freak out. And he tries to no-sell it.
That's the good. We never cut away. That's the best part. Oh, that is so good. And then let's circle back around a little bit. We've talked about the slapstick.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about the balance. There's more stuff to the stuff involving the kids.
Mm-hmm.
The great thing about this is another way you can kind of see a layer to this is that we have Chet who has that relationship with his kids and Roman who doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And Roman is very subtly jealous of this. in a way that, and it's not like maliciously jealous, like the way you'd expect Roman to be about probably other things.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that scene where he's listening through the door gives you that vibe of he genuinely in his heart wants that with his girls.
Mm-hmm.
We get a great payoff to when he has to go down the mine shaft.
Yeah.
Like I talked about the climax and the actiony portion of it, but that's a great emotional moment that he has to do that
Mm-hmm.
and be a father. That's a really great emotional payoff.
He does try to get out of it immediately, though, because Chet's just like, somebody's got to go down there, and his response is just, well, not me.
I'm claustrophobic.
Yeah. He goes back to that being wrapped up in his own self for just a second.
Yeah, so it's a great moment where we actually see the arc in real time.
Mm-hmm.
When he comes to the realization that he has to, if he's going to be their father and mend that.
Mm-hmm.
As you can see, even the girls themselves are more outgoing once they feel like Roman cares about them.
Yeah.
But there's also another angle to that where Chet isn't as successful with his kids as Roman thinks he is.
Mm-hmm.
Because he also seems like a loser to them in a lot of ways, especially compared to Roman and his cool, rich shit compared to what Chet had planned.
Yeah, because when you said that, I thought of when Chet's like, I'm going to get a pontoon boat, and Roman's like, no, get a jet boat or whatever it was.
Yeah, and that's kind of a recurring theme throughout. But then there's moments when this is going to take us in a whole other direction. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
This is what this movie needs to be. Dan Aykroyd and John Candy.
Mm-hmm.
That's all this movie needs, with all the aspects we've talked about. With all the great parts like the sincerity and the kids and all these side things, their rivalry, all being descendants of just the two of them, those two characters.
Mm-hmm.
You get where I'm going with this?
No.
There's something this movie doesn't need.
What is it?
We do not need the Buck subplot.
Yeah.
We do not, for any reason whatsoever, need the Buck subplot. The most Buck subplot we need is the scene with the ring.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most and I get it, because it's John Hughes. And if anybody knows young love, obviously it's John Hughes. We have seen that. And the director, Deutsch did Some Kind of Wonderful and, of course, Pretty in Pink.
Mm-hmm.
So I get where it might be a good idea on paper to have that in there.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, yeah, you have the two of them, but it's like, well, why don't we also while we have John Hughes and Howard Deutsch teaming up together, why don't we try to appeal to a younger demographic and throw in a potentially relatable love story? Well, first off, not even close.
It doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah. And it's,
because it can't.
Yeah. Like, what is the end goal with that?
Yeah.
So take that out. You've got plenty of what we need with Buck to make Buck a well-rounded character with the scene with the ring and the boat.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So I don't know why that's here. And then it's also one of those things where it starts to tarnish other things in the movie.
Are you thinking of the 96er scene where he keeps checking his watch?
Yeah, the 96er scene needed to be its own bit. It did not need to, and it works as its own bit, but the trouble is it's being used to further this subplot with Buck by making it a conflict. So it diminishes the whole impact of having that as its own bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because all it's doing is because as soon as he's talking to her and she's saying, guys always stand me up. I've never had a boyfriend that's lasted that long because guys always stand me up. And he's like, oh, I promise I won't. Instead of really getting to bask in the wonder that is the 96er scene, we're sighing because we're like, well, we know where this Buck thing is going. And that's what's on our minds because that's all that seems being used for.
Yeah.
It starts to tarnish other things in the movie that work by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that was just a wrong call, was the Buck subplot. So and there's also another great moment with Buck.
Mm-hmm.
that perfectly sells their relationship. You don't need a Buck subplot. You need the scene with the ring and the boat, and you need the moment where Chet's trying to start the fire, and Roman's giving him shit, and Chet starts to fight back, and we just see like Buck smirk, like he's proud of him for standing up to Roman, because Buck is sick of Roman's shit as well.
Yeah.
So,
which it makes you wonder how he's that sick of it, because all we've seen him do is gallivant and try to hook up with the Rain Man girl.
And that's, yeah, because the moments are in there that need to be in there.
Mm-hmm.
There was just no reason to give Buck more.
Yeah.
Except for, like I said, unless they, because I almost feel like that had to have been like a studio call where somebody told Hughes, hey, why don't you do this well? Why don't you try to throw that in here somehow?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But, yeah. So, but yes, and then we eventually get to our climax.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how well the sincerity that really works balances out with seeing a bear's ass.
Mm-hmm.
It's something I think about from time to time. It's like, does that work? I don't know.
Let's not forget how the bear's ass got that way. It started by Robert Prosky having a lamp that was a gun.
But just never explained.
Like, instead of doing stuff with Buck, why didn't we do some more stuff with Robert Prosky?
Yeah, or just more of the townspeople in general. I would have loved to have seen more of the lightning guy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it is pretty skillful that he gets one scene and the payoff.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that you were able to fit that in. I said, there's so much here that's so well constructed. There's just some moments, Buck, that make you think it's not as balanced. But it really is. There's just some things that are a little too much.
Mm-hmm.
I think. So, oh yeah, that's another thing too, is the whole thing going on with Roman is that the whole family feels a distance from him after a while when we get those rare individual scenes with Annette Bening where she talks about how he's like consumed by his work and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I do love and once again, it's a cliche, but there's something about these characters, especially these two, where I feel like they can make it work, especially with some of the lines. Like when I say Roman was subtly jealous, the only time we really get that in words before it's being like dealt with
Mm-hmm.
is when he's like, why do Chet's kids look at him like he's a god, and mine look at me like I'm a rack of yard tools and Sears? It's lines like that make the cliches go a little beyond and make the characters a bit more fleshed out, even if they're doing something cliche.
And the delivery helps.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm really shocked we didn't get more of the two of them headlining a movie together.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it also kind of works because it kind of feels like it kind of makes the movie special in its own way, that this is the only time they really headlined a movie together.
Yeah.
And that they work together so well as seen here.
You could say that a lot with John Candy, because you can make the same argument with John Candy and Steve Martin.
Yeah. Yes, that's the thing, too, that this and RV have in common is they both star actors that we lost too early.
Yeah.
So do you have much else to add to The Great Outdoors?
Not that I can think of. I think we pretty much hit everything, talked about every scene that mattered.
Yeah, because I've probably watched it a couple of times in the past year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always so happy with how well it's held up.
I think another strength of The Great Outdoors is the way that the story's told. It's pretty relatable. We all know that person that has to one-up everything, and it's almost kind of gratifying when you find out that he's a one-upper with no ammo. Like, he's broke. And then we were talking about deliveries. Even the last bit of the movie, John Candy still brings his delivery when he's slowly realizing why they're racing home.
Yeah.
Because he just keeps chuckling and just keeps going, race you home. And then, like, the horror consumes his face when he realizes why.
I love when they have that really sincere moment that just ends with, get the hell in the car, we got to beat him all.
Yeah.
He was really good about capping off a sincere moment of comedy because it's so often that comedy can ruin a sincere moment.
Mm-hmm.
But like Hughes and Candy working together was like magic in finding
Mm-hmm.
that balance.
Yeah, and it shows too because they worked together, what, 4 or 5 times?
Yeah, at least.
Mm-hmm.
So is this? Do we kind of transition into RV now?
Yeah. Yeah,
Which,
we can
like
go
I
there.
said, like I was saying, a lot of people will find this one-sided because a lot of people hate RV, as far as I'm aware. If there's some RV fan base out there I don't know about, I'm glad you're out there. I'm glad you're out there fighting the good fight in your own way.
But I think RV shares a lot of similarities with The Great Outdoors in that there's a lot of comedy that doesn't really work, but there's still those little things that do.
Yeah, it's always the big things that don't work as well as the little side comments.
Yeah.
One that comes to mind is okay. Here's the thing. Let's just. I mean, we're kind of jumping around already, but let's just, now that we've gone here, I'm just gonna pluck one scene out of context and just talk about it by itself.
Okay.
Talking about those moments we were talking about. I find myself laughing throughout the raccoon scene,
Mm-hmm.
and it has nothing to do with the raccoon or what the raccoon is doing.
Okay.
The raccoon is in the background of a lot of funny small moments. I love the fact that there's a couple of moments where one of the kids will say something snarky, and Bob will comment, "Ooh, good one."
Mm-hmm.
Like he does it when he says, "Okay, guys, great news," and JoJo says, "I'm adopted." He's like, "Ah, good one," and then he just keeps talking. And then there's another one when they're saying how they're afraid they're going to get eaten by the raccoon. And Josh Hutcherson says, like, what is it on the South bitch diet?
Mm-hmm.
And Bob just very subtly says, "Ooh, good one." And then right after that, they start shoving each other. And I love his delivery of, "Oh, look, this is exactly what the raccoon wants. It's playing head game." And then the moment when he throws in like the bomb and he says, "Suck on this, Rocky." all of those lines are funnier than the raccoon itself and the slapsticky shit that's going on.
It makes you wonder if Williams threw him in there because he is notorious for his ad-libbing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, knowing him, I imagine probably 85% of his lines were probably not scripted.
The movie was probably written around him.
Yeah, like Aladdin.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
at the same time, if it was written around him, I would love to see a cut of RV where we get R-rated Robin Williams.
maybe that's what a lot of people that hated this movie wanted.
Yeah.
Because I feel like you could pull it off.
Yeah, and I think Barry Sonnenfeld's the director. Barry Sonnenfeld, I feel like, would have taken off a leash.
Yeah, like RV with Get Shorty's humor.
Yeah.
What the hell would that have been?
I mean, I think if you would have given Robin Williams a little more leeway, he could have really sold some of those reactions, like to the Gornickies.
Yeah, because there's something so important about the casting of Robin Williams in this movie. And it's something we were talking about before we started recording. All the Monroes are assholes, and the movie's not trying to hide that.
Mm-hmm.
So if this movie is going to work, which of course most people thought it didn't,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that probably had to do with the fact that we are following a family of assholes.
Yeah.
Because, like, technically in the Great Outdoors, we're following the Ripleys, and the Craigs are the assholes.
Yeah.
So it would basically be like if we were following the Craigs throughout the Great Outdoors, with the Ripleys occasionally coming in. And that movie would probably not work.
Mm-hmm. Which is what happened here, because we follow the Monroes and we get little sightings of the Gornickes.
Yeah, and of course, the Gornicke's whole thing is that they are annoying.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same
And
time,
even Jeff Daniels admits that later in the movie.
yeah,
I think he's like, we're not everyone's cup of. He uses something. It's not tea.
he said something very Travis Gornicke of him.
Yeah.
But Cheryl Hines even says at the very beginning, we're not friendly people.
Mm-hmm.
And she says that early. I don't even think they've left yet. Yeah, that's her argument, that they shouldn't go to RV parks.
Yeah.
If they're not friendly. And it's like, when you start your movie off admitting that, how much is an audience going to give a shit?
Yeah, how much are they going to buy in?
So the big question is, in the movie's defense, if they're assholes, they know they're assholes, we know they're assholes. Is everything bad that happens to them funny because it's something bad happening to them?
Yeah.
Or is it the situation that's supposed to be funny?
Mm-hmm.
Is it like, I feel like this is where a lot of people thought the movie failed, was the movie is so kind of its kind, like kind of a churned out thing of its kind, that it wouldn't have had the foresight to say the scene isn't funny because Robin Williams gets covered in shit. It's funny because Bob Monroe is an asshole and he's getting covered in shit.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the writing stopped at they get covered in shit, haha, and that's why a lot of people think it doesn't work.
You could have even sold it. You could have even sold it to where, and the movie kind of does this, but it doesn't do it in a way that's outright. That Bob seems to be the most decent of all of them, and he's the one that gets the shaft most of the time.
But going back to what you were saying about if we had gotten like an R-rated movie,
Mm-hmm.
and like if we really went into Bob's darkness,
Mm-hmm.
because there is a moment early on that makes you think Bob's going to be a much darker character than he actually is.
Mm-hmm.
We've already set up that he's very, very bitter.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically say to their children's faces, having you guys basically ruined our lives.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically their point at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a moment at the beginning after JoJo's friend covers Will Arnett in whatever that is.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
The scene where the girl walks in front of the car when they drop her off and he inches forward while she's there. That's really funny because he went there.
It also kind of sets it up too in the very, very beginning where JoJo's character as little girl is like, I'm never going to get married. And his response is, it's not as bad as it looks.
Yeah. Like there's something kind of dark there.
Yeah.
But then it's just like imagine if Bob going through the stuff that Bob goes through with the attitude that he has when he thinks about running that girl over.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of movie would we have?
And you were talking about sincerity. I know we're jumping around again, but I know you're talking about sincerity. There's a glaring difference in the movie, in The Great Outdoors, when Roman is explaining to Annette Bening what's going on. And she's just like, why didn't you tell me? You can buy that because she doesn't show that much that she's all about the material things. She likes that she has them, but it doesn't show that her life revolves around them. In RV, when Bob has that moment with Cheryl Hines, I don't buy it as much because all Cheryl Hines did for the first half of the movie was bitch that they weren't in Hawaii.
Yeah, there's something because
Annette Bening does that with Europe in The Great Outdoors, but it's only when they first get there and then she's done.
Yeah.
Where Cheryl Hines spends half the movie bitching about it. And then you expect me to believe that she would be okay with him losing his job and not having money? No, I don't buy that for a second.
Yeah, because as an addition to that as well, basically the whole cliche of business dad,
Mm-hmm.
dad that's too busy, which we talked about with Roman.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that's such a cliche? That is one of the oldest cliches in the book.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what you were saying, was everything feels so much more natural in the great outdoors about
Yeah.
that.
Because if you take the example of Roman being the business dad, it's shown that he's too involved by him having a disconnect with his kids. His kids aren't mean to him, there's just not a connection. Josh Hutcherson and JoJo are straight up assholes to Bob.
And it's and because of that, where we say in the great outdoors it feels natural,
Mm-hmm.
it definitely feels like a script turning its wheels in RV when it comes to that.
Yeah.
That's us saying how it feels. RV feels more churned out in regards to the kind of movie that it is.
Yeah. I don't think RV would it a lot of it didn't work. I think even less of it would have worked if you didn't have Robin Williams and Jeff Daniels driving it.
Yeah. Another great moment of Robin Williams is having a small line, but also kind of showing the assholery of his family also.
Mm-hmm.
Is the moment where he knocks over the shopping carts.
Yeah.
And he's just he's trying to talk them and he's picking them all back up. And this is kind of going unacknowledged.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, once he's picked them all back up, just right in like mid thought, he says, "Thanks for the help." And then he just keeps talking.
Yeah. And that happens a lot. Like when he's putting the blocks in for the tires. I mean, and it's another thing too, where like, Cheryl Hines holds him on the hook for cooking dinner. After watching everything he goes through, any normal person would have been like, okay, let me help you. And they just straight up don't. They make him suffer. I mean, it's like if you go back to kind of the inception of all these kind of movies, Vacation. I mean, Clark was over the top, but at least his family was supportive for the most part until he took it too far.
Yeah. And Vacation has.
I mean,
Vacation
Ellen wouldn't have been happy, but Ellen and Russ would have helped pick up the cards.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's something about him and Rusty's relationship just in general.
Mm-hmm.
A lot closer than anything we see here.
Yeah.
But there's also like a whole scene devoted to the moment where he goes too far.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in RV, it's just it's the movie's thing.
Yeah.
Like it's basically RV almost in its entirety is the "I think you're all fucked in the head" scene in Vacation.
Yeah.
And it stays that way. And speaking of,
Which
they're actually
another thing I don't like too that RV does, before we move on, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it's almost infuriating is the wrong word because it's just a movie. But it is a little annoying that the family, despite being assholes to Bob the whole movie, still vilifies him for trying to make a work appointment. Like, you didn't even want to go on this trip, and now you're mad that he's, trying to keep his head above water.
Yeah, because it always felt like such a contrivance that he has to hide working on his laptop.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, though, that moment when he's trying to do it on his phone,
Mm-hmm.
he's got the whole thing typed out, and then it won't send because he doesn't have a connection, and he starts to do that little cry.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most relatable thing in the movie. Whenever I see the start of that little cry as he looks at no connection, and it's like relatable.
Yeah.
I've typed out entire things and then lost a connection. It's that level of bad.
See, I think too is if you wanted to take this approach where Bob is surrounded by assholes, I think it could work if instead of approaching it as a family comedy, you approached it as a black comedy. Like, I think RV would have worked better had it had some rewrites and been presented as a black comedy.
Yeah, because going back to Vacation, let us not forget, somebody ends up dying in Vacation. And that's the thing too is I was noticing that it kind of, since we keep talking about Vacation, there's quite a few things in this movie also that kind of feel like they're kind of taking a little bit. Sort of obviously like the moment when Bob is surrounded by them, kind of all singing their own different songs, and he's like surrounded by it.
Mm-hmm.
Very much feels like the train scene in European Vacation.
Yeah, which is funny. Which is funny that we're making so many Vacation comparisons, because when I was reading the trivia for RV, Chevy Chase was heavily considered.
That's not surprising at all. This would have been like right on the cusp of his relevancy too.
Mm-hmm. Now there is one actor that was considered that I looked at it and I was like, okay, I'd kind of like to see how that would have turned out. One of the other actors considered was Steve Martin.
Yeah, it would have felt very Cheaper by the Dozen territory, probably.
But if you took it in the direction of a black comedy starring Steve Martin.
Yeah, like at least, at the very least, bump it up to PG-13.
Yeah.
And then see where you go.
Yeah. Because I could see Steve Martin having all the little quips like the good ones or something like that.
Yeah, because My Blue Heaven is only PG-13, and it got dark, just dark enough. So he's capable of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Steve Martin's capable of just about everything, except for Clouseau. So we'll give him
except for Clouseau.
There's another moment where I've never quite been sure what the joke is.
Mm-hmm.
It's another thing where this may have come first, because this would have been at the start of this show or near the start of this show.
Mm-hmm.
I think the joke is just that there's no electricity. But do you feel like there is a joke to be had when he says, when he's showing off the RV and he's like, oh, if you guys want to watch a movie, and it's just a really, it's like the scene in the dinner party episode of The Office with the really small TV.
Yeah.
But I think the joke is just that there's no electricity. But I feel like the punchline should be, it's a tiny ass TV.
Yeah. But it's like they got it right with the little thing that pops out at the side, because it takes forever to get there. That part they got right. That's funny.
There's even, when you talk about that stuff that takes forever,
mm-hmm.
There's even a joke in this that I would hate in another movie.
Mm-hmm.
I would think, why are they dragging this out? Why are they padding this out? This is so worthless.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Robin Williams makes it work or what, because this joke would not work for me in any other movie. I can't explain it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I'm sure people hated it that hate the movie. The first thing right before they take off, when he can't get his seatbelt on. And he does this for a fucking eternity.
And it happens again later.
And I would hate that in another movie, but for some reason, when Robin Williams is doing it, I'm invested, because he's doing this, and when he gets this far and he still does this, I'm like, oh, he was so close. Like, why did I get invested in the seatbelt bit? But I did. I can't explain it.
There's other small fun parts that Robin Williams brings that might not have been effective anywhere else. Like the scene where it's the second night in a row he stayed up all night working on his project, and he goes to sit in the front seat, and Cheryl Hines like smiles over at him, and he just has this blank stare looking out the window. And she's just like, do you want me to drive? And rather than saying anything, he just unbuckles his seatbelt and just goes straight to bed.
He crawls away.
Yeah.
Oh, just a random note to throw in here real quick that's not related to anything.
Mm-hmm.
Totally forgot Tony Hale was in this, because I don't think I knew who Tony Hale was when this came out. I don't know that anybody did. I don't know what he was doing back then.
I don't know.
But yeah, now he's known for Veep and being the voice of Forky.
Mm-hmm.
So, he starts the whole thing off. He's the one that first says RV and gives him the idea.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're talking about more actually going more into those little Robin Williams moments.
Mm-hmm.
There's another moment that stands out that kind of shows them being assholes, but they can make that funny.
Mm-hmm.
It's the moment where it's a bizarre moment. It's a really bizarre moment. I will say that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the moment when the Gornickies are talking to them the first time they all meet. So they've just met Kristen Chenoweth at this point. They just met. And it's the moment where she's like, oh, but I have other means of making money on the road. And without missing a beat, Bob goes, hooking? It's like, first off, it's so out of nowhere
Mm-hmm.
to this person he's just met. But it's like the casual audacity of it. It's hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
It's hilarious that he would just say that.
And the Gornickies like look at him for a minute and then they just let it go.
They say it as if he was genuinely asking.
Mm-hmm. Before we get out of this video, I think we need to spend a couple minutes on the Gornickies themselves. And the other day, when we did our video on The Perfect Storm, and we talked about John C. Reilly's transition from drama to comedy, Jeff Daniels kind of did it first.
Yeah, he's like our go-to example of the movie we knew him for was the odd thing in his filmography.
Yeah.
And it's like I was thinking about the fact of a while back, like around the time this movie was out, or being made, Kristen Chenoweth would have been dating Aaron Sorkin, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the connection of Aaron Sorkin and Jeff Daniels, and it's like thinking about Travis Gornicki and thinking about Will McAvoy and the fact that they're the same person.
Mm-hmm.
Mind blowing.
It is. Like, Jeff Daniels completely submerges himself in Travis Gornicki. Like, his delivery and his general nice guy demeanor. Because, let's be real, there's an alternate universe out there where Jeff Daniels could have easily been Bob, too.
Yeah. Especially in the early 90s when, like, There Goes the Neighborhood and stuff was coming out.
Mm-hmm. He could have been Bob. Era. There's a universe somewhere where Jeff Daniels could have been Todd, Bob's boss.
Yeah.
Now I kind of want RV to be remade in the style of The Nutty Professor where Jeff Daniels plays everyone.
Another thing he really perfectly embodied was that first shot we get of him.
Mm-hmm.
Right after the shit joke in this movie is very long, by the way. It's very, very long for a shit joke. But to the shit joke's credit, it takes us right into Travis Gornicki. And as soon as
I didn't catch it until we watched it this most recent time. His name's dropped before we ever see him. Because they're looking for a certain type of hose. And Matthew Gray Gubler is like, I think Gornicki's got one.
Oh my God.
You didn't pick up on that?
It may have just passed by me all this time. I love that he's foreshadowed.
Yeah. There's not much foreshadowing going on, but it's there.
Yeah, because what I was getting ready to bring up is his triumphant entrance.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as we get a full body pan up, as soon as we see him, we know the kind of character he is before he even speaks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, you were talking about Robin Williams bringing up the hooking thing. There's another moment like that with the Gornickies at the end when he's given his speech. And he just casually says the line, whenever a white man picks up a banjo, my cheeks tighten.
Yeah.
like that came out of left field.
He says it in such a Robin Williams way. That had to be his line. I refuse to believe that wasn't his line. That is right out of his stand-up.
Yeah. That was Robin Williams literally going, just give me one. Just give me one. I'll make it count.
I feel like any line devoted to plot was scripted. Any other line Bob has was his. that has to be the case, and I refuse to think otherwise. But yeah, apart from that little moment with the banjo line, we've already pointed out the problems, but we kind of really fall apart at the end here.
Yeah.
As to be expected in a movie like this.
Mm-hmm.
I do like one moment. I do like when the RV is completely submerged and they have their little fight and their conflict that we see coming from a mile away, and we just watch bored, waiting for it to end because we know where this goes.
Mm-hmm.
And then he starts to take off into the water.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny at first because it looks like he's just, that's it. That's the end. I'm being careful with my wording here because we're talking about Robin Williams.
Yeah.
But once again, tragic irony of real life comes into play, much as it did with the John Candy line that was funny.
Mm-hmm.
And so we wait. And it's like, is he really going to come out of there with the RV? How is this going to work? And then it's built up and built up and built up, and he comes out on the bike.
Not only that, but he took the time underwater to put his helmet on.
And the bike is foreshadowed in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
They make fun of his seat.
Yeah, and let's not forget the fact that the bikes were the first thing to go in the water, so he had to go all the way to the back of the RV, unhook the bike, put his helmet on, and then ride it out. It's so implausible.
And that's what's funny.
Mm-hmm.
People get so caught up in plausibility. Sometimes you just have to go for jokes like that. And a lot of the times they may not work, but him coming out on the bike, for me, works. I don't get it, but it works. But then, like I said, pretty much after that, we start to fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
As most movies like this do. And I think the falling apart, the peak bullshittery of this movie is Josh Hutcherson flipping Will Arnett. That is... if there's one road this movie shouldn't have gone down, I wish I had never seen Josh Hutcherson flip Will Arnett. It is dumb in all the wrong ways, and takes this ending into a more beyond stupid territory. I know it's one moment, and I know this seems like a lot for one moment, but it bothers me. It took the movie to a new low.
What about when the RV backed over the cars and it completely flattened them?
I suppose I like that just for the fact that it's a play on the way they resolve this situation is way too perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, hey, we just happened to be here. Hey, we were chasing you. We were trying to catch up with you all morning. Hey, would you like a job? And it's like, that's kind of a nice payoff that the RV becomes a sentient being and fucks that up.
How do you feel about whenever the cop does pull him over and there's that last little fuck you to Bob where he opens the glove compartment and just gets covered in water?
And the rental agreement's all fucked up.
Yeah.
Once again, feels very much like the destroyed car in Tommy Boy, the destroyed car in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. We've seen it before.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a good joke. I mean, the destroyed car has stuff in its back pocket from time to time, no matter what era you're in.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to try it, you might as well try it.
Do we agree that the RV was probably most definitely inspired by the Family Truckster?
Yeah, I would also say the Van and Little Miss Sunshine, but these pretty much came out right around the same time, which is interesting.
Yeah.
There's even this scene where they play with the horn when he's trying to lean forward and he keeps honking it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then, of course, we get the end credits where Jeff Daniels actually gets to show off his legit guitar skills, so there's something.
I read something really fun in the trivia. Jeff Daniels apparently does have his own RV that he drives around all the time. So, like, they were going to have a day spent training him on how to drive it, and he showed up to the training in his own RV, and they were like, yeah, we don't need to do this now.
Yeah, I heard a story about that because he was, like, he was telling a talk show story. He was going somewhere in his RV, and these guys stopped him and he basically got out of like a traffic violation by doing lines from Dumb and Dumber. Like they basically told him, if you do lines from Dumb and Dumber, we'll just let you go. And he apparently went full Harry, and they just let him go.
Funny too, we were talking about the comparisons between The Great Outdoors and RV. They even both have like a musical interlude going on over the credits.
Yeah, and I don't know. As far as The Great Outdoors goes, what the hell context is that in?
I have no idea.
Like, when is that? It looks like it's at the birthday party.
Yeah.
But when did they start singing and dancing? When it was revealed that the dude was dead, and I don't think the kids are there either.
Yeah, I don't know.
Did they go back that night and party?
At least the ending of RV is set up because the Gornickies have that little random music number at that first dinner.
Which is also really funny that I point out Jeff Daniels' actual guitar skills.
Mm-hmm.
If I remember correctly, Jeff Daniels does have a band with his son in real life.
I believe so.
So it just all connects. It's weird how much Travis Gornicki connects to his real life.
Yeah. It makes you wonder if Jeff Daniels actually has Ernest Goes to Jail marathons.
Yes. Yeah, because you've got the RV and family bands. It's like literally his life.
And we were talking about how the family vilifies Bob. And we totally glossed over the fact that at one point Travis vilifies himself.
And by the way,
mm-hmm.
say what you will about the Gornickies, I have always loved the reveal that his kids are like geniuses.
Yeah.
Because if they were homeschooled, how smart is Travis Gornicki? And I forget what Mrs. Gornicki's first name is.
It's something Ann.
Of course.
Yeah. But that's even paid off because at the end of the movie, Travis Gornicki's like, I went to Stanford.
Yeah.
Somewhere Colin Hanks is in a room crying.
So, yeah, obviously RV has its issues, but that's the thing, too, is I hadn't seen it in years. I probably hadn't seen it since, like, 2007 or something.
Mm-hmm.
I watched it again recently, and I remembered everything. So that's got to say something. I don't... But, yeah, I mean, obviously there's no competition, though, here, right? Obviously, The Great Outdoors is not only the better movie, but, like, just objectively. Like, nobody can say RV is a better movie than The Great Outdoors.
No.
Especially going into the fact that if you watch The Great Outdoors now, even though there's some slapstick in it that doesn't work, there's talking raccoons for some reason, there's bare asses, literally. There's still something in that that works.
There's Buck and his love story.
Yeah. And the fact that I feel like the only reason the raccoons are subtitled is to bring back the lips and assholes joke, but they just had to keep sticking with it.
Yeah.
Did you know they have a post-credit scene? Did you get that far?
Yeah.
Yeah, the raccoons have a fucking post-credit scene. The raccoons are going to start an Avengers talking raccoons. Oh my god. Talking raccoons. Of course.
Yeah.
I almost wore my Rocket Raccoon shirt, too.
Which is funny because you criticized both raccoon scenes.
Yeah.
Both movies.
All right. I'd say we've come full circle enough that we're done here.
I think so.
We threw out a lot of different ones we might do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure what the next one is. Do you want to do the sports one next? Or
yeah, I think we could go there.
There's the sports one. There's the one where we reference both movies in this video somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another one we talked about as well, which is related to a movie that I still haven't reviewed yet.
You still haven't done that?
No, but I've got a list of what all I want to put in that review video, so it's just gonna be a big one, like a big catch-up video of new with like on-demand shit and streaming shit.
Yeah.
So I'll get to that eventually, and then I'm doing another King thing shortly after this. We're almost done with those, so
Yeah.
these will probably carry us for a while. Me and you ones.
Probably.
So until all that stuff, I'd say that's pretty much about it for this. Isn't it?
Yeah, I would say so. No hints for the next movie. Just know that sports are involved.
Yeah. All right.